I confess I knew little about the life story of the boxer Emil Griffith. That was until I sat down and read the beautiful book written by Donald McRae. Man's World is a fascinating tale. Griffith was a homosexual boxer who would rather have made hats than punch another man in the ring. His life story is extraordinary. I'm giving away a free copy of this delightful book, signed by the author Donald McRae. Following our conversation, you have a chance to win that signed copy. So stay tuned until the end of this interview with Donald McRae. How did he come to mean so much to you, a boy growing up in South Africa?
Well, I'm an old man now, 54, and he came to South Africa in 1975. I was 14 years old. It was at the height of apartheid. And although he was not a political man, he did actually stand up to the apartheid government, because the fight was in Soweto, and the government said, you cannot go in with a white trainer. And he said, well, the fight is off. The government, I could not believe it, buckled to him and said, okay, we'll make an exception. Your trainer can go into Soweto. So he's been lodged in my head ever since then, and I think that's where the source of the book is. He was a 5-time world champion at welterweight and middleweight. So within boxing, he's seen as one of the top 50 fighters I think who've ever lived. He was an efficient fighter, but not particularly exciting. Partly why he wasn't exciting was because of the death of Benny Paret. He wanted to avoid knocking out future opponents. Also, his sexuality was such a difficult subject for him. In the 1960s and 70s, it was totally impossible for him to come out. Especially in the 1960s, homosexuality was illegal in all but Illinois. That was the only state where it was not an illegal criminal act. So I think people are unaware that he had this constant battle with his personal life. He would have loved to have been a milliner and make ladies' hats. I'm not quite sure how good he was as a hat designer, but as a fighter, he had an aptitude that just came to him so easily. And he was so efficient. He could do anything in boxing well, competently. And I think this is why he was so good. And he had enormous heart and stamina. And although he had a lot of ambivalence towards boxing, I think when the bell went, his tenacity just poured out of him. And this meant he was enormously difficult to beat. And he fought on and on, year after year, and ultimately to his detriment, because he ended up with dementia. I mean, his trainer, I interviewed him in 1999, Gil Clancy, and said the word he kept using was efficient and competent. So he wasn't exciting like Muhammad Ali was exciting, but he was just good at all the basics. And combine that with his heart and desire, you had a good fighter. In 1962, which is when he fought Benny Paret the 3rd time, and the fight ended in ultimately, or led to the death of Benny Paret, because Benny had made a homosexual slur.
What did he say?
He called him a maricon, which is Spanish for faggot. The New York Times were there, and in their early evening edition, their journalist spoke about the homosexual slur, and when he picked up the early edition copy on the way to the fight at Madison Square Garden, he could not believe it, because the sub-editors at the New York Times, the august journal, had actually felt that the word homosexual was offensive, and each time the word homosexual was used, they took it out and used the word unman, UN-man. So the journalist was incandescent, because he said, Emil Griffith is a man. The humanity of this man is so obvious, and he felt it was deeply offensive that they were calling him an unman.
That fight between them was pretty vicious. Do you think it was that way because of being called a maricon, or?
Definitely. I mean, Gil Clancy, who was in the corner, did say to me that Emil was not a vindictive fighter. A lot of fighters like Mike Tyson get pleasure out of hurting their opponents. Emil wasn't like that. But that night, because what had happened 12 hours before, when he had been taunted so vehemently, he was consumed with anger and bitterness, and he wanted to hurt and punish Benny. I don't think for a moment he was thinking about taking his life, but I think if the weigh-in had not happened, the fight would have ended in a knockout defeat, but I think Benny would have still lived.
Recite to me his famous quote about how people judged him in the light of that. Oh, right, okay.
Well, the quote is, I kill a man and most people forgive me. However, I love a man and many say this makes me an evil person. And he said this in 2004, towards the end of his life. And for me, this just encapsulated the dilemma he lived with for 40 odd years. Ultimately, people did forgive him for taking the life of Benny Perrette, but he felt he was still judged for being gay, and he felt that a lot of people did consider him an evil person, and this hurt him, I think, until his dying day.
At some stage, he ended up fighting for peanuts.
It's a typical boxing tale, unfortunately. Fighters always tend to lose their money. He made a lot of money, and in the 1960s, he was earning sort of purses of $50,000, $60,000, which was a huge sum of money then. But at the same time, he was supporting 17 people, his extended family, and this went on for years and years. So he ended up fighting long after he should have stopped, and ultimately it led to his dementia, unfortunately.
Which is how he was with dementia when you met him, very late in his life. But are you glad you did get to meet him, even though...
I did, and of course he was a shell of a man. He couldn't understand anything I said. But actually, although it sounds such a dark and painful subject, I was lucky enough to meet people who knew Emil well, and they could give me an insight into the pleasure and the joy he had. So whilst he was tormented by his sexuality and the death of Benny Perrette, he was a party guy, and he was out in Times Square in bars and clubs having the time of his life, as he kept saying. And I think people did see him as an icon and as a beacon of hope. So for all the darkness, there was actually a lot of light, and that helped me keep going with this book.